Well, at long last, we finally come to the last Pink Floyd album, 2014's The Endless River, meant as a posthumous tribute to Richard Wright, but also debatably the weakest of the Gilmour trilogy. Even now, I'm kind of undecided how to rate this thing. I remember it coming out, I remember being intrigued by the beautiful album cover by Hypnosis veteran Aubrey Powell, and the first to be designed since Storm Thurgeson's passing in 2013.
And the last phrase but one on the Division Bell is The Endless River.
And thinking, wow, jam sessions from the Division Bell? A whole album of tracks like Marooned? This is gonna be awesome! Well, it wasn't that exactly. As I mentioned in the Division Bell review, they had amassed some 60-plus ideas, whittled the best of them down for what would become the Division Bell, but there had been discussions of possibly releasing a second disc of ambient material.
Funnily enough, almost a throwback to Umaguma or something like that.
It had even been organized by engineer Andy Jackson into a piece called The Big Spliff. So obviously this had been on the table for a while, but clearly it wasn't a big priority to release it. I actually stumbled across an interview in the early 2000s with David Gilmour where he admitted, "They'd only be for major fans, serious jamming. You'd have to be a hardcore fan to be interested." And even in the EPK for the album, he basically says the same thing.
You have to get into the right mood to listen to this.
Look, I've produced my own records before, and I can tell you that jam sessions, while they can be interesting and lead to cool ideas, don't always make for the most engaging of listening experiences. Even on jazz records, there's usually a head or a melody and some form to help guide the improvisation. Pink Floyd is, of course, known for a lot of great instrumental material, but it's not like they just jotted a bunch of ideas on tape and spliced them together. They worked them out live or in the studio meticulously. Echoes being one of the finest examples of turning these nothings into something epic. Jams work well on bonus discs, anthologies, or reissues to give you something extra. But I guess from a promotional standpoint, what do? Do you just re-release the Division Bell with this second unheard disc, or let it be its own thing? Obviously, a new Pink Floyd album is going to generate a lot more interest, and maybe David and Nick just wanted it to be its own thing. But Rick was unfortunately gone, and as I've said before, posthumous releases are difficult to pull off. Initially, they were going to leave the tracks as they had been recorded back in '93.
But we thought, well, if we were continuing with these pieces 20 years ago, we would have added to them. It's substantially from that period, but there's quite a bit of additional musical additions that have gone on.
Production duties were divided among David, Andy Jackson, Phil Manzanera, and Youth. And when news of this album's release came out, I had the same question I'm sure everyone had. Is Roger Waters involved? As I said in the last video, David and Roger had performed a couple times leading up to this, and as far as we knew, seemed to have an okay relationship. But much to everyone's disappointment, he was not involved, and even said in an interview, "It's not rocket science, people." After almost a decade of hearing Floyd fans trash this album, I didn't have high expectations listening to The Endless River again back when I began this series. But I decided to take Dave's advice and just accept it for what it was, an ambient album. I just put it in, sat on my couch, relaxed, may or may not have smoked something, and let the music take me somewhere. And surprisingly, I did actually find myself enjoying it, to a degree. I have since found myself putting this album on if I'm stressed or need to chill out driving home from a job and I don't want to listen to Shine On You Crazy Diamond for the 5 millionth time, and it really does ease my anxiety. I love that we get to hear Rick's voice at the beginning, an interview from Live at Pompeii where he says, "It makes the concept clear. This is Richard Wright's swan song, and with the use of David Gilmour's EBow, you're reminded this is still Pink Floyd. They know how to create soundscapes. Is it as good as Cluster 1? Well, no. And don't even think you're going to hear anything as genius as Marooned. It's clear they took the best ideas and used them for the Division Bell. And remember, it was David Gilmour who said during the final cut sessions, if these songs weren't good enough for the wall, why are they good enough now? Nonetheless, we do get those promised fly-on-the-wall jammy moments. It's What We Do is kind of fun. Nick plays his signature drum fills, Rick adds in some synth textures, and David plays again with his whammy pedal. The only problem is his guitar just never really takes off like it does on the Division Bell or even his solo albums from this era. So the album is divided into 4 sections, none of which really have any conceptual significance. So I'm not going to go through every one of these ambient pieces, but there are a couple standouts. Skins is one of 2 songs where Nick Mason is credited as a writer, and it's one of the rare times he actually performs a drum solo, with Dave and Rick adding some Saucerful of Secrets type soundscapes. We even get to hear that classic gong at the end. I think this track is very at home with Floyd's early avant-garde material. I like some of the shorter pieces, like The Lost Art of Conversation. The title is a nice callback to the theme of the Division Bell. It really shows off the genius of Rick's playing, and it does lead nicely into On Noodle Street, featuring Guy Pratt on bass and John Caron on those synth pads. Allons-Y, French expression for off we go, has a cool run-like-hell guitar riff. I just wish it went somewhere. And the song bookends Autumn 68, a nod to Rick's Summer 68, not 69, an archival recording of Rick playing the Royal Albert Hall's pipe organ. But the best song on the album features a voice sample from Stephen Hawking, who you might recall was sampled for the Division Bell's Keep Talkin'. This one's appropriately titled Talkin Hawkin. Of the instrumentals, I feel like this is the most fully realized concept. Rick's piano gives us a strong motif supported by Guy's bass, and David echoes Rick's piano with some of his best guitar work on the album. That's Durga McBroom singing the beautiful choir vocals, which she told me about.
I listened to the whole thing. I picked 3 songs. So my vocals were actually on it before David's. I picked Surfacing, Talkin Hawkin, and what turned into Louder Than Words.
And once Dr. Hawking's voice comes in, you really feel the weight and emotion of the song, and it's a nice callback to the Division Bell. In fact, I've actually played Keep Talking and Talkin Hawkin back to back, and it works surprisingly well as one long piece. Talkin Hawkin gives me exactly what I'm looking for, some sublime Pink Floyd music that can stand along with tracks from the Division Bell. There's a few newer tracks which sound like they were written specifically for the record, meaning Rick isn't on them, like Anisina, hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, and I think Surfacing is a newer track which also features Durga's vocals, along with some beautiful acoustic guitar and lap steel work from David. Again, I just wish it had a stronger melody or motif, but all in all, I'd say The Endless River is a decent listen. Until we get to the last song. After 17 instrumental tracks, we get a song with vocals called Louder Than Words, which, why would you just tack on a vocal song at the end? My guess is they probably just wanted some commercial material in order to sell the album, but it's not a good song. It's not necessarily a bad idea for a song. Polly Samson wrote the lyrics and was inspired by watching Pink Floyd reunite at Live 8 and how the music they create together is louder than all their bitching and fighting. But it's just not particularly interesting. Even on one of David's solo albums, this would have been considered filler. I push back on people who criticize Polly's lyrics on the Division Bell, but this is one instance where I can't defend her words. They just come off as very trite and don't seem to gel with the melody. Even the guitar solo feels anticlimactic. And the biggest problem is the 4th band member of the band they've written for isn't there. This is an instance where I really wish Roger Waters had been present, obviously to help punch up the lyrics, but also imagine David Gilmour and Roger Waters singing this together. Again, I don't know what their relationship was like in 2013, 2014, but this is the last song on the last album of Pink Floyd, and my God, how amazing would it have been for them to come together one more time, even if Roger had just come in and played bass. At that point, it wouldn't even matter if the song was lacking. Just to have David, Nick, and Roger together with some posthumous keyboards from Rick, it could have been as magical as when the surviving Beatles posthumously reunited with John Lennon on Free as a Bird. Even the recent Now and Then single includes all 4 Beatles in one form or another. This reunion could have been a happy ending to Pink Floyd's recording career. But It's just wishful thinking. And needless to say, Louder Than Words is not the triumphant ending that High Hopes was, and it really puts a bad taste in my mouth whenever I finish the album. But aside from Louder Than Words, The Endless River does have a vibe to it, some standout musical moments, and it certainly does give Rick one final bow.
It really brought home what a special player he was.
This is the last chance anyone will get to hear him just playing along with us.
I have seen some Floyd fans come around to it in recent years, and bottom line, I'm glad we got to hear this music. But do I recommend listening to the full album? Well, I'd say if you're a fan of the Division Bell or ambient music, you might want to check this album out. You might find some nice surprises. But if you didn't get into the Division Bell, you're really not gonna like this. I'll give The Endless River a spotted fish, but again, be in the right mindset for it. Talkin Hawkin is the must-listen, a true showpiece for Rick's piano. Also check out the Nick Mason-driven Skins, another Rick piano piece, The Lost Art of Conversation, and Surfacing. And I guess you might as well experience all of this ambience. Oh my god. Cannot believe I just went through all of Pink Floyd's albums. That was a lot. But before I rank them all, I want to go through some recent solo projects, so join me in the next episode.
Now, there is only the gentle breeze. Where the surf and sand fight for command, waiting